The best competition in the world is back this week. Champions League Matchday 7 is going to be incredible. There are some huge games like Arsenal versus Inter, Marseille versus Liverpool, Real Madrid versus Monaco, and Barcelona against Slavia Prague. There are some crazy storyline, some crazy matchup, and some interesting tactical battles that we're going to talk about today. So make sure you follow along. Before we get into it, of course, don't forget to like and don't forget to subscribe to A9 Media on the road to 200 subscribers. Look, it'll be an honor to get there. I appreciate everyone's support up until now, and of course, let's get into the video. And just before we get into the games, just a reminder of the Champions League table. Now, of course, we've got Arsenal sitting very tightly in number 1. They are the only perfect team in the Champions League, 6 out of 6 wins, and they've only conceded 1 goal, so they are pretty much perfect and the best team in Europe by far. Bayern Munich in 2nd, PSG in 3rd, and you've got Man City and Atlanta, Inter, Real Madrid, Atletico Madrid, Liverpool, and Borussia Dortmund making the top 10. And just a reminder, of course, the teams from 1st till 8th go directly into the round of 16, and the teams from 9th till 18th will go into a playoff. Now, of course, them teams are Liverpool, Borussia Dortmund, Tottenham, Newcastle, Chelsea, Sporting, Barcelona, Marseille, Juventus, and Galatasaray. Now, these are all the teams that could potentially go into a playoff, so these teams really need to go in and try to win this week, and this is why this Matchday 7 is so big. Straight into the first game of the week, Arsenal versus Inter. Now, look, like I said before, Arsenal, the most perfect team in the Champions League, 6 out of 6 wins, 1 goal conceded. This is a team, you know, in top of the Premier League as well. They did just draw against Nottingham Forest, so they're not going to be in the greatest form when it comes to that. They did draw the game before that as well. So look, Arsenal are not in the greatest form at this moment in time. Of course, they did beat Chelsea in the Carabao Cup, so there's a bit of momentum there for Arsenal. There was a bit of non-momentum in there in the Premier League in the last couple of games as well. So Arsenal coming into this game are heavy favourites, especially at the Emirates. Now, of course, Inter Milan is another team that have had a lot of changes. You know, Chivu coming in and replacing the Inzaghi, who of course took Inter to the Champions League final, where they did get destroyed by PSG. So look, Chivu has done okay this season. They have lost every single big game this season. They've played Liverpool, they've lost. They played Atletico Madrid as well, and they've lost there too. So it is a big change at Inter. So Inter really need to try to win in a big game this season, and I hope they can possibly go and shock the world and beat Arsenal. But I'm going to go with an easy Arsenal 2-0 win. On to Real Madrid versus Monaco. Of course, my team, Real Madrid, coming into this game with so many changes themselves as well, just like Inter. Of course, Xabi Alonso being sacked. Real Madrid sitting 7th in the Champions League, sacking Xabi Alonso after being 2nd in La Liga 2. Look, disgraceful decision. For me, I am just not positive about the season whatsoever. I don't see how Real Madrid are going to have any chance with Arbeloa as your manager. But look, Real Madrid versus Monaco. Monaco have had a terrible season so far. They're not in great form whatsoever, even in Ligue 1. And of course, in the Champions League, they are sat 19th. So they're not in great form whatsoever. They have lost the 3 games. They've only won 2 games. So look, they are in a massive, bad form. And even Kylian Mbappe came out today and said that, Monaco aren't in the greatest form, but they can still have some danger. Yes, of course, they can have some danger. Real Madrid are always going to be a team that struggles against some of these teams, because Real Madrid at this moment in time are not in great form. The injuries, of course, Rodrigo is still not fit. Antonio Rudiger is still out. Militao is still out, of course. Trent Alexander-Arnold is still out as well. So there's many injuries for Real Madrid. But I'm going to go with a 1-0 Real Madrid win. I think Real Madrid are going to get the job done. And then moving on to another game. A great game, by the way. Marseille versus Liverpool. Now, of course, Liverpool being the team that is, incredibly out of form. I mean, they're just, due to Burnley at home. The relegation, battling Burnley at home. Arne Slot has had massive issues this season. Signing Wirtz, signing all these players, and being unable to fit them into the team and get the right balance. And of course, they consistently concede goals. That defensive line is not great whatsoever. Konate's had an awful season. Van Dijk hasn't been his best, and Mo Salah is at the AFCON, and he's had a terrible season too. So look, Liverpool sat in 9th, of course, coming against Marseille. Marseille sat in 16th, and Marseille are one of them teams where De Zerbi, of course, managing that team. They have got good players like Mason Greenwood. They have got decent players who can, have some threat against them. Of course, Real Madrid did face him as well at the Bernabeu, where it was a narrow 1-0 win. So look, this is going to be an easy game for Liverpool, and of course Liverpool going away from home. So I just think that Marseille are possibly going to get a 2-1 win, and that is my hot take. Of course, we have our beloved rivals Barcelona, who really need a win. Look, Barcelona sat in 15th playing against Slavia Prague, who obviously are in the bottom half. They desperately need a win here. Of course, they did lose to Chelsea, which wasn't a great result whatsoever. But of course, they did turn around against Frankfurt in the last game. So look, Barcelona really desperately need a win. And of course, Barcelona just losing to Sociedad on the weekend allowed Real Madrid back into the title race. Hansi Flick would want to get a big win, and I think he'd want to get it convincingly. So I'm going to go with a 4-0 Barcelona win. In the other big game, we've got Sporting versus Paris Saint-Germain. Now, of course, PSG haven't been in the greatest form this season. They are still, in the top 5 of the Champions League, of course, but PSG have struggled a bit in the League One. They haven't really showed the consistency of last season. I believe Luis Enrique has struggled with a lot of injuries. Of course, Dembele has just returned. Desiree Doué has returned as well. They have struggled with a lot of things. Of course, Hakimi being off for AFCON and also being injured against Bayern Munich, where they, of course, did suffer that loss. So, look, I'm going to still go with a PSG convincing win, a 3-0 win. Let's move on to Manchester City against Bordeaux Glen. Now, of course, this will be an away fixture for Manchester City. So, Manchester City coming into this game on a terrible form. They've drawn the last 3 games. They've lost against Manchester United at Old Trafford. A terrible loss for Pep Guardiola. And if they don't get a result here now, of course, Man City are going to have some doubts about, Pep Guardiola. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but last season, of course, we did see the worst season of Man City's history in the last 10 years. And of course, this season, they have made a lot of signing. Of course, Guehi will be official by the time this video is out. You'll also, they've already signed Semenyo as well. Of course, them two can't play yet because of the rule in the Champions League where any January signing can only play after the group stage. So they are gonna miss them two guys, and of course Ruben Diaz and Guardiola being injured has hurt them massively. But Man City have not been great all season defensively, so even with them guys in there, so I just think if Man City don't get a result here, it will be a big pressure on Pep Guardiola. But I can't see Bordeaux Glen putting a dent into this Manchester City team, so I'm gonna go with a 3-0 convincing Manchester City win. Another really interested game is Tottenham versus Dortmund. Now look, listen. Tottenham with Thomas Frank is, he's on the verge of being sacked, which is incredible for me. I thought Thomas Frank was a great manager for Brentford, but of course he's coming to a Spurs side who have a lack of quality in my opinion, but he's not getting it right with the tactics. And of course he did just lose to a West Ham team who have only won a couple of games this season and are in relegation battle. So look, Tottenham desperately need a win, and of course it is kind of toxic. It will be at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Dortmund themselves are not in great form either, so I'm going to go with a 1-1 draw. And we've got Copenhagen versus Napoli. Now look, Napoli have had so many chances to get in the top 8 or get in the best standing, and Napoli continuously just kind of have awful performance in the Champions League. And I've said this before about Conte, he's not the great Champions League coach. Whether they win the championship in Serie A or not, they don't have the greatest performances in the Champions League, and their form is evident of that. And they literally sat 23rd in the league, and of course Copenhagen are 24th. And if Napoli don't win tomorrow, it's going to be a disgrace, because Napoli could really get knocked out of this Champions League, and it would be a big shame for a big team like Napoli, who got it right with McTominay, who got it right with Lukaku when he plays, and Kevin De Bruyne might be back at that time. Napoli needs to be in the round of 16, and if they don't win tomorrow, it could be curtains for that dream. I'm going to go with a 2-0 Napoli win. I really do think they're going to get the job done, and Conte can have a sigh of relief. Bayern Munich are going to be hosting Union Gladbach. Now, of course, Union Gladbach are one of the bottom half teams of the Champions League. Bayern Munich, of course, second in the league. Arguably the second best team in the world. Just lost to Arsenal. Well, it was 4-1, but I thought it was quite an equal game up to that, the couple of goals. So Bayern Munich on the company, of course, have been smashing it this season, in the Bundesliga. I can't see anything but a Bayern Munich trash, and I'm going to go with a 5-0 Bayern Munich win. Another La Liga team, Galatasaray versus Atletico. Now, of course, everybody knows here that Galatasaray is a tough, place to go to. I'm going to go with the Atletico 2-0 win. Chelsea will be hosting Pafos. Of course, Pafos, again, some of the bottom half teams in the Champions League. Chelsea, of course, being Barcelona and, in the good standing in the Premier League. They just won 2-0 at the weekend, so I'm going to go with a convincing Chelsea 2-0 win as well. The La Liga game is Atlanta versus Bilbao. Now, of course, Bilbao actually, doing okay in the Champions League. Not incredible. Atlanta, of course, who are 5th in the Champions League. And I just think Atlanta, with the quality that they have, are going to win 2-0. Moving on to Juventus and Benfica. Of course, Juventus, the big team in the Champions League. Juventus coming into it against Benfica. Look, they have only lost 1 game this season against Real Madrid. They have drawn 2 games, and they've also won 2 games as well. So I'm not going to be too critical of Juventus' record, but they are sitting 17th, and of course they need to win as well. They're just below Marseille and Barcelona, and of course Benfica coming into this in not the greatest form either. They're 25th in the league, so I'm going to go with a Juventus convincing win, 2-0. And that is pretty much all of the Champions League games for the match day 7. Of course, there are some hot games in there, some great matchups in there, and of course, Real Madrid have to bounce back after the terrible kind of weeks that Real Madrid have had. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Let me know your predictions as well. Let me know what you think and who's going to win. Well, who will be the shock of this ties, and who will be, kind of the best performers in terms of the players and in terms of the team. And of course, as always, like, subscribe, and until next time, Hala Madrid.